Okay, thank you. Then that takes you on to deputations, Lord Provost.
Thank you, and apologies to elected members. I should have obtained your permission that we're going to listen to the deputations under the order of business, but I don't imagine that that's going to be an issue, but I'll do so formally just for the record.
Agreed.
Excellent, in which case our first deputations are in relation to motion 8.1, will then be followed by deputations in relation to items 8.2 and 8.4 on the agenda. It's my intention to take the deputations in that order, followed by questions. We'll then have a 10-minute recess to discuss what the deputations have said to us, and at which point we'll take the items on the agenda in that order immediately after that recess to debate them. First deputation on 8.1 is Des Logney from Edinburgh TUC. I know you've been with us many times before, Des, but I will reiterate you have 10 minutes to make your deputation, followed by I will then take unison, which is I've got Greg Kelby here. I'm not seeing Greg on my list, but I'm assuming that Greg's with us for his 10-minute presentation, at which point we'll then take questions, since you're both talking on the same topic. So, Des, over to you.
Thank you, Lord Provost. My name is Des Lockney, Secretary of Edinburgh Trade Union Council. My colleague who's speaking after me is Mary Alexander, who's a delegate to Edinburgh TUC. We'd like to thank the Council for agreeing to hear our deputation and our comments on motion 8.1. We will each speak for 5 minutes. My own comments, are based on the relationship of the motion to the publication of the report of the Edinburgh Integration Joint Board, EIJB, which was published on Wednesday morning, to be discussed at its meeting on Tuesday, the 28th September. I think that the paragraph 2 of the motion needs to be strengthened given the approach of the EIJB as stated in its report. The motion calls for comprehensive consultation. We are not convinced that the EIJB will carry out comprehensive consultation if left to its own devices. It does not seem to be committed to the standard of consultation as practiced by the City Council or Lothian Health. It seems to be relying on the advice of what is called the Consultation Institute, which no one I know has ever heard of. I looked up its website and discovered it was an England-based organisation. None of its advertised senior teams seem to have any experience of social care issues in a Scottish context. The Institute seems to be a HR organisation whose role is to advise employers on how to consult with staff in employment situations. I do not think that this organisation is the right body to advise the Scottish public sector body on how to carry out the consultation as needed. I'd have thought that the EIJB would have got all the advice it needed from the City Council or Lothian Health. Actually, I was amazed that EIJB is instructing an English HR company to, and I quote, undertake an analysis of the statutory and non-statutory requirements, scrutinising legislation, statutory guidance and case law to advise the partnership on the process and procedures to follow to ensure the EIJB fulfills its obligations for consultation and engagement. Instructing an English organisation with no obvious prior experience in Scotland, I think, is just completely out of order. I hope that in adopting motion 8.1, the Council will say to the EIJB that the word comprehensive means that the consultation will address public concerns in a comprehensive manner. The consultation must go beyond listing evidence to justify the EIJB case. The Edinburgh public will want to know if their plan really will meet the demand for quality care home places over the next 10 years, bearing in mind demographic changes. Their plan does not seem to take into account the impact of COVID, job insecurity, and the impact of universal credit cuts on social care and NHS services. We're also aware of the possible impact of lengthening waiting lists due to the impact of COVID. There's a paragraph in the EIJB report which says the increasing size of the older population will result in their care and support needs changing over time, with a proportion requiring more complex nursing-led care rather than the more general low-level care that can be offered in the partnership's existing care homes. The puzzling point about this statement is it only seems to refer to the public sector care homes. It is saying nothing about the standard of care available or will be available in private sector care homes in Edinburgh. They are handing over the provision of care home places in Edinburgh to the private sector without any commitment to complex nursing-led care in the private sector homes. How will the AIGB enforce standards in the private sector? In our view, the private sector, which has a dismal record in the last 18 months, sole reason for existence is to make money from the property speculation and to reduce workers' terms and conditions to the minimum. Quality care has suffered in this race to the bottom. It is a major flaw in the EIJB approach to the care homes closures that it does not address the performance of the private sector in Edinburgh. In another paragraph, the EIJB states, quote, at the same time, there is a strategic move both within the EIJB and nationally for people to live independently and in their own homes for as long as possible. This means that much of the low-level care provided in the partnership care homes is now being provided within individuals' own home through home care and care at home services. We believe, from the consultations on the trade union move, we believe that the statement is incorrect. We do not accept that it is true that low-level care referred to is actually occurring and currently and in the near future being provided with in all the individuals' own homes that would be required. We urge the City Council adopting the coalition motion to ensure that, in fact, the EIJB does a proper comprehensive consultation. We don't think that the passing of the motion guarantees that. I think the Council has to take further action to make sure that a proper consultation happens. Thanks for listening to me. I'll be happy to answer, if I can, any questions, but I'm passing you over to my colleague, Mary Alexander. Thanks.
Welcome, Mary. Mary, are you with us? I can't see you on my screen. I can only see so many people at a time.
Okay.
Okay, good. Yeah, can hear you now, Mary. Excellent.
Sorry. Thanks very much. There have been a number of public protests, petitions and press releases from the trade unions and community groups since it became apparent that 4 publicly run residential care homes would be closed completely, with a 5th, Drumbray, changing its use to medically led care of the elderly. The outcry was large because there was no public consultation and news of the planned closures was released less than 2 weeks before the scheduled EIJB board meeting in June. The staff, our trade union members, were told of the closures before the decision was made and contacted us, upset about the lack of consultation and fearful for their future and that of the residents. Some of our members had just been moved to these alternative roles in the wake of other care home closures. The residents of the homes and their families have had a rough ride over the last 18 months, with COVID, illness and death blighting their communities, as well as the forced separation with their loved ones. The announcement of these closures meant they were once again thrown into a state of insecurity regarding their future and their place with the friends they have made in their home and the community within which they live. The Feely report has at the heart of it a human rights-based approach to social care. It's a response to the crisis we face in the ever-increasing demands for residential and home care, faced with a system that's not working for older people who deserve dignity and respect in their later years. It's a response to a system not working for the largely female social care workforce, our members, who work tirelessly for little reward as a race to the bottom in terms and conditions manifests itself through the commissioning and procurement process. There is much to be positive about in looking to a future national care service, which we believe should be publicly owned and run, and we will continue to campaign for this. National consultation is out there and ongoing on sectoral bargaining, on the role of local authorities and IJBs in delivering social care. And there are concerns about democratic accountability and the role of the councils in this new order, who are best placed in our eyes to know their local communities and deliver the care they need. The Edinburgh experience has thus far not been a good one. The fact that the EIJB took legal advice on what their role should be on public involvement, engagement and consultation tells a story when our members are employed by the local council and NHS. The fact that there seems to have been no scrutiny of the role of the private sector, where some of our members get less than the living wage, didn't get sick pay when they were self-isolating or had COVID. The fact that those in residential care and those being provided care at home are being shortchanged. Information coming from the EIJB, or the lack of it, is concerning. It's a public body responsible for the strategic direction of care in Edinburgh, yet it has an inability to properly explain its decisions, including an inability to provide the factual information upon which it bases its decisions. To go back to the motion, it's a step in the right direction, but we must learn from the mistakes made in Edinburgh, which we believe goes against the Feely recommendations. The consultation must be comprehensive and robust and look beyond the options previously decided and include all stakeholders, including unions, and the impact on their members. There should be no reduction in publicly run care homes, and we should look to expand publicly owned and operated homes as per Feely recommendations. There should be transparency and clarity around residential care needs and scrutiny of the Care Inspectorate report findings to determine the actions to maintain the current public provision. The residents of Edinburgh deserve a decent level of care when they need it through public provision, and workers in social care deserve to come into a profession with decent pay, terms and conditions and a structured career path. Edinburgh has the opportunity to show this new pathway we are on, and the EIJB needs to work with the local council to get it right. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Mary, for your contribution, and also Des for yours. I'm now going to ask Greg Kelby of Unison to give us his contribution, at which point I will then open it up to elected members for questioning. So, Greg, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Lord Provost. Thank you, councillors, for having me today. My name is Greg Kelby. I'm a regional officer for Unison and I'm president of Edinburgh. And today, Unison is calling on elected members to support motion 8.1, council care homes. We need to model care with the interests of people at its heart, not the interests of shareholders. Unison believes the citizens of Edinburgh must have council-run and operated residential care homes.
Sorry a second, Greg. I'll just
Sure.
You're kind of breaking up on us. I'm not sure if it's just me or if other elected members are also having a bit of difficulty.
I have a good connection my end. I hope is that restored itself.
Yeah, that sounds a lot better, Greg. So
right.
If you don't mind, I think it might be worthwhile just starting again. If that's
sure,
okay.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem at all. So I start. My name is Greg Kelby. I'm a regional officer with Unison, also a resident of Edinburgh. And today, Unison, we're calling on elected members to support motion 8.1 on council-owned care homes. We need a model of care with the interests of people at its heart, not the interests of shareholders. Unison believes the citizens of Edinburgh must have council-run and operated residential care homes. Unison has been running a Save Our Care Homes campaign for several months now, and in that time we have met regularly with care home staff who are also concerned about the future of their own employment, prioritise the well-being of the older people they care for. We also work behind the scenes to engage with as many local politicians and decision makers as possible. And we built and promoted a public-facing campaign which has received a great deal of support and attention from the public and the media. We acknowledge that the residential care homes are under-occupied due to the pandemic and necessary safety measures, but this should not be an excuse to close them. Unison has been reliably informed that demand for residential care remains high and are aware that there is substantial waiting lists for admission. Throughout this process, Unison is conscious that any meeting we have held with senior management or with the IGB has been little more than a box-ticking exercise with no detailed information being supplied, and many of our questions have remained unanswered. Questions such as, where's the data to support a care at home model? What happened to the 16 million originally earmarked for a new care home? How many people are waiting to be admitted to a care home right now? In February, Unison welcomed recommendations from the Independent Review of Adult Social Care. That report carefully reflected the workforce issues to be addressed if we are to have a high-quality, rights-based service with universally applied standards of fair work. But the manner in which we have been treated is a direct dismissal of staff's effective voice, one of the dimensions in the Fair Work framework. It isn't bad enough that these and other questions have been ignored or fully answered, but I think there's also a very real concern that the democratically elected councillors may have been treated in a similar manner. We've had conversations with many of you over these past few months, shown that information provided has been maybe out of context or not provided in its entirety and given a completely, or maybe even given a completely different meaning. That's why a delay in the decision-making process is necessary for you to ensure that you have the full facts before you can safely come to the right conclusion. I don't think that that's too much to ask. We don't think that's too much to ask. There'll be those of you that will say that's exactly what we're going to do via public consultation, and that making a further request for information, open and honest public consultation on the future of residential care provision in Edinburgh is welcome, but for some unknown reason, it does not apply to Drumbrae Care Home. If Drumbrae is to be switched from a residential care to a hospital-based complex for clinical care, where's the justification? What is the cost of residential care, the staff and the residents? It's not just a workplace or a building, it's a home. Questions remain unanswered as to this care home just as much as the other four. Therefore, does it make sense for the same delay in the decision-making process to apply? If you're to be confident that you have the full facts before you can safely come to the right conclusion, you should agree with me today. The delay is all the more feasible when you acknowledge that Walker's Healthcare, who own Ferryfield House, have offered to extend the breakpoint in that lease by 1 calendar year to October 22. That allows time for consultation, so a move doesn't have to happen straight away. Public consultation isn't just about gauging how popular a decision is. Public consultation in this instance is about understanding the nature of need. It's about giving decision makers the opportunity to inform themselves about what our city needs in the way of person-centred care. As a trade union, Unison also has a duty to consult with our members. That's why yesterday we wrote to the Chief Executive, Andrew Kerr, informing him of our intention to run a consultative ballot for industrial action of our members at Drumbrae. It's not something that Unison or our members at Drumbrae take lightly, but what is currently happening needs to be challenged, and we will support our members to ensure that their voices are heard. Change brings uncertainty and anger. That is why certainly it's going to affect the morale of the care staff. Going forward, retention rates could become an issue, and losing staff means a loss of experience and skills, which would be another blow for the people of Edinburgh. I want to thank those of you so far that have supported our campaign. We won't forget who has, and I'll just finish up by saying on behalf of Unison, save our care homes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg, for your contribution. I have a few members who are wishing to contribute. Can I ask elected members, to make your questions concise, as we are overall got a time limit on this section. Also answers if they can be concise, and can elected members be clear as to who they're directing their question at the very beginning? And I'll start with Councillor Day.
Thank you, Lord Provost. And I have a quick question for Des, Mary and Greg. I'll start by saying I don't think we should get into debate about English and Scottish in this debate. I think that's fairly relevant. I think my question to Des then is, would you agree, Des, that the motion that sits in front of us about looking to bring the services, any services you can in the private sector back in-house, should be a priority, given the comments that you and Mary made about terms and conditions, given that the council's health and social care staff were all paid for any absences, full pay during COVID-related absences. Would you support us in terms of every attempt we can make to bring the services in-house?
Maybe if I can answer that first. I mean, the only reason I mentioned the word English is because Scotland's a different legal and social and political context, which, as far as I can see, this organisation had no experience of, have any dealings with. So I think that's the only point I was making about that it wasn't relevant to engage this organisation. Yeah, I mean, we think that the public sector care homes perform at a better level compared to private sector care homes. They provide a better service, and of course, they have better terms and conditions for their staff. And therefore, we think that should be, the starting point in planning social care home provision in the future, in the next 10 years, which should be seeking to encourage a higher standard. And encouraging a higher standard, integral to that, is encouraging the development and creation of more public sector care homes run by the City Council. Mary, do you want to?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Des has said there. Obviously, contracting out of care has, as we've all pointed out, led to a deterioration in terms and conditions and a revolving door in the social care sector. I'm part of the Fair Work Convention, and we conducted an inquiry into social care for the very reasons that our members were we were had lots of very negative feedback about their experiences, about the quality of care and the pay in terms and conditions. So Uniting Edinburgh TUC and other unions are fully behind services being brought back in-house. Our workers deserve a decent level of a decent pay in terms and conditions, and they're certainly not getting it through the commissioning and procurement process now, and that includes third sector organisations.
Thank you. Councillor Doggett.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I have a question for Des and possibly one correction to help him as well. At the June meeting of the IJB, all 5 councillors who sit on the board were unanimous in requesting a delay because we believed that the information that you have suggested that we need had not been provided in the initial report. So I think no matter our political views, we wanted to have the complete information to be able to make an appropriate decision, so you can be assured on that. Turning to my question for Des, you have made some sweeping generalizations around the standard of care in the private and public sector. Are you aware of the Care Inspectorate report into the Drumbray Care Home of 7th of January 2020, in which 5 significant failings were highlighted by the Inspectorate?
No, I don't think I've read that particular report. My assessment of failings of the private sector is based on all sorts of publicity that I've read locally, and some care home reports which showed multiple failings by the private sector. But I'm not saying that other places don't need to be improved too. I suppose my case is based on the evidence I've had from members and what I've seen in the media, is that generally speaking, the public sector has a higher standard than the private sector. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Munro.
Yeah, question for Des and Mary, and one for Greg as well.
You've got one question, one person, Councillor Munro. We're time limited here.
Right. Okay. Well, look, for all 3 then. Given the deputations that you've made this morning, do you expect direction to be given by the City of Edinburgh Council today for the integrated joint board on Tuesday? And has anything been said to the trade unions about the high number of vacancies overall, the homes, 108 in total, with 47 out of 60 places in Drumbray being not filled, and yet there is a waiting list? What has been said in any of the negotiations with you about any of these matters?
One person to respond, please.
Mary, can you deal with that?
Well, Greg may have some more information on, the high number of vacancies that you're talking about, the residents, where there is, it appears that there is a deliberate plan not to have those places occupied. we don't know much around that, but we are aware that has happened, and obviously that is another reflection of the poor standards that are being applied when there are so many people desperate for residential care. Your other point around do we expect the council to direct the EIJB? Yes, I would hope that we would do that. They would do that, given the submissions that we've made today and the motion that's on the table. Thanks.
Can I come in? No, sorry.
Very quickly, Greg.
Yeah, no, thanks for the question, Gordon. It's just the data that I have. So, for example, I had some data that suggests that there's currently 13 residents at Drumbray with 43 vacancies. And to us, that's alarming when we acknowledge that in February 21, Drumbray were in the process of welcoming new residents, but these were halted despite both the IJB being asked several times and no explanation was ever given to us. So it's also worth noting that the decision to stop intakes occurred 4 months before the proposals to hand over Drumbray were made for staff and residents in Unison knew about it.
Thank you, Greg. That's useful. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I've been advised, as you're aware, that you're having regular meetings with EIJB staff and health and social care staff to put in your opinion and your input to the actual process. And there's also been an additional meeting set up and a consultation going on in Drumbray where unions have been in attendance with patients' representatives. Would you like to comment on that and how these discussions have been going on and what traction you've had?
Who would like to respond to that one? Who's best, please?
I could come in.
Greg, yeah, on you go. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you for your question. As I alluded to in my deputation, our view is that a lot of these meetings that we've had, we felt have been more than of a box ticking exercise, and we've came out with more questions than actual answers. We haven't had any answers on where was the data around the care at home model, what's happened to the 16 million originally planned for another care home. We've engaged with staff. Staff are really uncertain about what's going to happen and concerned, and we hope to try and negotiate further and put a stop to the transfer before the next IJB, but we need your support in order to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. I'm getting more members. I've stopped the clock on this section. I'm getting more members. There is a time limit on this because we have got 2 other deputations to hear on a different issue. So again, I would say to members, be very specific who you're asking the question of and be very concise the question, or I might not be able to get to everybody. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I have one question and it's for Greg, and I'll be as concise. So do you agree that it's important for us as the City of Edinburgh Council to have clear, concise and correct information around the impact of the proposed closures of these care homes? That it's also important for us to also consider the opportunities to retain, fund and upgrade the care homes in our ownership, but also to explore what other opportunities there are to expand the provision of care under our ownership on sites that we own. And would you agree that the EIJBs have been chronically underfunded, sadly, as a result of Scottish Government funding to councils?
Thank you for your question. Yep, I absolutely agree that agree with what you say. I think funding is an essential issue to that, and as a trade union we campaign regularly for the Scottish Government to provide further funding for social care, and that is something that we will continue to do as a trade union. We do have some facts and we do have some figures around the projected costs to what it would cost to, in the interim, upgrade some of these facilities. I probably don't have a lot of time to get into the specifics around that, but the data is available, and we would ask that that is made available to every one of you to consider, and time is made to consider that we don't make any hasty decisions.
Thank you very much, Greg. Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I'm sure I speak on behalf of all the councillors here, Greg, when I say we're really concerned to hear that the employer isn't engaging in constructive discussions with you, and that's led to you now having to consider industrial action. I hope those concerned, whether the council's employees or NHS employees, will be listening to this and will engage in constructively with you to avoid that industrial action, because I'm sure none of us want that. On to my question, Lord Provost. So obviously care home staff have been through a lot over the last 18 months. They've been at the very forefront of the fight against COVID. Greg, I'd be interested just to hear how they feel now after going through all that, what the morale is like now, given what they're facing in terms of potential closures in the coming weeks and months.
Thank you for your question, Councillor Arthur. Fortunately, I've been able to go around and throughout the campaign period, I've been around all of the homes, I've engaged with our members, and what's really clear is that, and I alluded to my deputation, is that because of the nature of the work that these people do, they care more about the residents than their own terms and conditions. But what I will say is they're incredibly concerned, and the morale is extremely low because they feel that throughout a pandemic where they've been clapped and there's plaudits have been thrown out all the time about the work that these people do, the valuable work that these people do. And then now we're in this situation where people are potentially going to be displaced or lose their jobs. Morale is low. And these people just really care about the residents and the people that they look after, and they don't want to see a closure to the service. Thank you.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Main.
Thank you. And much of what I was interested to hear has been answered, and I'm very sorry to hear about the morale of the staff. Their staff are absolutely key. My question is to Greg, again on what appears to be a disappointing relationship and discussions and engagement with staff. You'll know, for example, that there are no nursing staff embedded in any of our care homes. Therefore, we can't offer certain services within our care homes that we probably would like to do. You mentioned upgrading facilities. Have your discussions with officers included discussing how the services are provided and how they might be enhanced and the buildings brought up to scratch and fit for the future?
Thank you for your question. Yeah, and yes, no, we have looked at how we can provide further and ask questions around how we can get further nursing care and more complex care support for individuals that come in. We also think that the people that are best placed to have those discussions are the staff members and the people that work within the home and deal with them. And one of the things that we're committed to do is to continue to engage with our members and make sure that their voices are heard and put forward to the IJB, and hope that we can do that and have more meaningful dialogue with the employer going forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I have a question for Greg, if I may.
On you go.
Yeah, so my group, that's Labour group here, we just outright reject the closure of these care homes. My opinion is that we should start placing people in these homes, providing care for them, and stop wasting money by having care homes sitting below the level that they could be operating at when people need care. You've spoken about how your members feel about things. I think that they just want to get on with providing care to as many people as they possibly can. Would you agree, and would you reject the closure of those homes?
Thank you for your question. We absolutely reject the closure of these homes, and one of the things that we want to see is the care homes to be used to their ability and to their capacity, and where possible, upgrades to be made. Excuse me. What we also we want to, sorry, my wife just walked in and hit me for sex there.
The benefits of working from home.
No, we want to see these care homes filled. We want to see them at capacity, and we want to see staff supported to do their job safely. And we want to see the provision remain in-house. We don't want to see the privatisation of any services. And we are grateful to the Labour Party for their continued dialogue with Unison and the support that they've shown the campaign so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. That comes to the end of questions from elected members. So thank you to Greg, Mary and Des for your contributions and for your answers to the questions. Welcome back, and we'll now move on to motion 8.1 on the agenda. And I would ask Councillor McVeigh to propose the motion. Councillor McVeigh with us? Councillor McVeigh?
Thank you very much, Lord Provost. In moving the motion, and I'll be brief because you can probably hear that my voice will be unlikely to last the rest of the day, but the key thrust of the motion that we're bringing forward is to protect some of the future aspirations that I think we all have and are shared amongst the people of Scotland and people of Edinburgh around publicly owned and publicly operated and delivered care. The Feely Review, I think, gives us a context of where we're aiming to get to as a country, and certainly Edinburgh is no detached from that in terms of the kind of services that will be delivered. And I think it's incumbent upon us to comment on some of the actions that are being proposed in relation to the IGB. But the intent is very much to try and make sure that the publicly owned and operated elements of care, which are already underpinning service provision in Edinburgh, are enshrined. Now, that is one of the things I want to underline very, very strongly in this, is that the provision of high quality, appropriate care for an individual's needs is absolutely should be at the heart of it. And I know that that is the motivating driver of the EIGB in deliberating these things within the available resources that they have. But hopefully our motion sets out very clearly what we're trying to get over, and also what information we look to get back as a council. The governance of IGBs across the country is obviously a little bit difficult to follow for members of the public and others in relation to NHS, council and EIGB sitting a lot of the time as a tri-party partnership. But the responsibility for this does rest very clearly with the EIGB, and it is for them to take certain decisions. But it is also incumbent upon us, particularly in relation to the council-owned assets, even though they are operated under the guise of the EIGB, to discuss that and get information back that's pertinent. I should say, Lord Provost, I don't want to say that much more. I think the deputations very helpfully set out quite a lot of information. I would say that the engagement with the trade unions obviously needs to continue. If there is information that needs fleshed out, then I think that's absolutely appropriate. I do also want to make clear in relation to the amendments, I'd be happy to accept paragraphs 1, 2 and 4 of the Conservative position and accept the Green amendment in full. And I think those both sit quite well together. I don't think we'd be able to accept the Liberal Democrat addendum or amendment as put down, mainly because what we're not trying to do, and hopefully that this is in the spirit, particularly of accepting the Green amendment in full, what we're not trying to do is be too prescriptive in terms of the outcome and getting to those aims that I talked about in relation to care. So I think we want to embrace and lean into the issue and discuss it fully in committee and get that information back to elected members. But I think the Liberal Democrat position is perhaps a little bit too definitive in that picture, but I understand entirely the motivation for bringing it. But I think that position very clearly rests with the EIGB in exactly the makeup of what Drumbury looks like and what its service provision looks like, and I think that's very much for them. So that's the only reason that we're not able to accept the Liberal Democrat position, but as I say, I hope we can get as close to consensus on this issue as possible, Lord Provost. I think it was Councillor Duggar who mentioned earlier in the debate that there was consensus amongst the members of the EIGB the last time this was discussed. I'm very conscious that this remains everyone's focus, absolutely united in trying to get the best for the citizens of Edinburgh. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. And to second the motion, Councillor Day.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I support the comments that the council leaders made already this morning. I think we all accept that this is a hugely complex issue with a whole set of dominoes that we're trying to manage at the same time. And alongside that, the Feely Review and a national review of our care service, which may completely change what happens going forward. I want to just commend the deputations this morning and everything they had to say. I think we would all support that we need to get this right. We shouldn't be prescriptive about the decisions we're taking at this time. That will be for the IJB to make. I think we all accept as well that it's important that whatever the government's line is on the National Care Service and the Feely Report, they should be properly funded and continue to have local democratic control from local members in local authorities like us. Our primary aim in the discussions I've had with many IGB members and trade unions to protect the most vulnerable older people in our city. I've openly said, and I'll stand by, that we should reject the care home closures. And I hope many other people in this meeting today will say the same thing. I'm grateful for the input we've had from the trade unions and particularly Unison's campaign. Our motion, as council leader said this morning, that we wrote many weeks back, to increase in-house provision is absolutely something we will try to achieve during this administration and for whoever's in the next administration to continue to champion in-house service provision. We heard from the trade unions this morning about the difference in terms and conditions and the way they're being treated by private sector employers, and everything we can do to bring them back in-house, we should do. Again, I think the consultation we heard this morning, that needs to be as far and wide as possible, with a primary aim that we ensure that residents and our staff are properly cared for during this process. I suppose to finish, Lord Provost, I don't think we've won the public battle on this yet. The public argument about this might be the right thing to do or not, and we need to get whatever the consultation is and goes forward, needs to involve all of the care homes that we're talking about today and a much wider review of how care sits as we go forward into the future. I'm happy to second. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Day. To move the Conservative amendment, Councillor Doggart.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I think there is a general element of consensus, or at least it was until the second half of what Councillor Day said, when he did discuss about being open-minded and not being dogmatic, but then he said he will fully oppose the closure of the council-run care homes. I'm not quite sure how that sits with being open-minded and willing to discuss. However, I can pick that up with him at a later time. Councillor McVeigh did touch on a very important point, and that was the very confusing nature of governance relating to health and social care, not just in the city, but across Scotland. Sometimes it's very difficult for IJBs to sit between local authorities and the relevant NHS body because they are issuing directions to both, but are totally dependent on funding from both. There is something around the governance of health and social care that does need to be fixed, and I think that does go beyond the Feely Review, and it's essential that that is picked up. However, turning to the substantive issue in relation to the care homes and the closure of the care homes, I think the challenge we've got is if we just look at the care homes in isolation, then we will reach a very clear conclusion, and the conclusion probably would be that we do not close them. However, it is just not about the care homes. It's about hospital-based complex clinical care. It's about intermediate care. And I'm glad that the administration has accepted point one of my amendment, because we have to look at the whole package. The IJB does not have the luxury of separating the different elements and cherry picking what has to be done. It has to produce a system that works for the city. And I am in total agreement with the unions in that the current system is not working. Now, if we're in agreement that the current system is not working, then we have to change it. And change brings challenges. And those challenges are sometimes unpalatable, and sometimes the decisions that have to be taken and the decisions that will be facing the IJB next week will be difficult. And I recognise that some will have local issues that they will struggle to reconcile. But we have to look at health and social care in the round. Absolutely essential. I'm slightly disappointed that the administration hasn't accepted point 3. While I understand the points they are making in terms of the Feely review, let's just remember that at this stage, the Feely review was just making recommendations. And it's not necessarily the case that we should be jumping straight into accept everything that the Feely review says, because obviously that will change as it's debated in Parliament. There will be legislation that will follow. And the key thing for us is, as a local authority, is that we then follow that, whatever the legislation is, whatever the will of the Parliament is on that. And I think that was the gist of my point in paragraph 3 being changed. And finally, there has been a lot of dissatisfaction expressed by the unions. I suspect there'll be some dissatisfaction expressed in this debate around the procedures that have been followed. Let me say that it has been totally inappropriate in terms of the consultation process, not just with employees and their representatives. It has been inappropriate with residents and the families. There are a lot of deficiencies in what we have done, and that was the purpose of my paragraph 5. I think we deserve an explanation as to why corners were cut. The IJB did not accept the initial documentation that was sent to it because it was accepted that there was not sufficient information to make a decision, that there had been corners cut, and that proposals were made that did not have evidence to back them. And I actually think it would be very helpful if senior council officers who were involved in this process could come to P&S and provide an explanation as to why that was the case. I think that would add a lot to our understanding of what has gone wrong in this process. And I would urge the administration to accept my paragraph 5 to try and make sure that we do have that openness and transparency, which might be the phrase of the day. And I think that would be quite helpful. So I am glad that we're getting close to consensus. We're going to disagree on minor points. We might disagree in terms of the overall position around who owns care homes and who provides the care for our senior residents. That is not the debate under consideration today. That's for the IJB to debate and to decide next week. So in light of that, I move my amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Doggett. Before I go to the seconder, Gavin, in the chat box, we have somebody called Donald Burgess. Is that, do we know who that is?
He is a member of staff, and I suspect he may well have been putting into the wrong chat box when he was doing his team's message.
Thank you very much, Gavin. Much appreciated. Clarity is always good. To second the Conservative amendment, Councillor White.
Thank you. With that got that cleared up. Maybe he can tie it all together so he gets the right one in future. Lord Provost, I'm happy to second Councillor Doggett, and there isn't a great deal to say, but reiterate some of the points because Councillor Doggett has covered this comprehensively. So let me stick with a couple of things. We heard from the deputations this morning about wanting everything as in-house public provision. And I think, as Councillor Doggett mentioned, Councillor Day talks about being open-minded and then called for lots more in-house provision. If we're going to look after our older people with an increasing population and more people needing care, then we need to use all the provision that's available to us. That might be public, it might be private, it might be third sector, voluntary sector. All three play a part, and all three will be important going forward with an increasing and ageing population. And all of that brings challenge. So if we're going to take the public with us on this, we need to be open and honest with them about what the choices are And the IJB needs to be forthcoming to the council and to other agencies about what information it has and what it wants to do to solve problems in the future. That means a review not just of care home beds, but this thing was actually called a bed-based review. Some of it is in hospital facilities. So it needs to be open and it needs to be comprehensive. If we're going to have change, we need to explain that to the public, and the IJB needs to explain it to this council. And so in that sense, we really do need item 5 of the Conservative amendment here, because that's calling for such an explanation. Where is this departing from council policies at the moment? What do we need to do to get that out properly in a consultation? So I hope that Councillor McVeigh will maybe have a rethink about item 5 and include it after all. Finally, Lord Provost, I am pleased at least that the administration, through Councillor McVeigh, have brought a motion on health and social care to the council. We don't see enough scrutiny of health and social care in this council at Policy and Sustainability Committee or elsewhere. So I'm glad that's happened today. Perhaps it can set a tone for the future that we look more at these issues and our part that we play in doing this. I hope it hasn't just been political pressure and need to play things off within the coalition, given what some Labour members have said that have brought that, and that we're genuinely moving towards a more open discussion of how we ensure that we provide the best care across the board to older people in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor White. To move the Green Amendment, Councillor Main.
Thank you, Lord Provost. And I'm very pleased to see that there's been a great deal of consensus both between what our deputations have brought, and I'd like to thank the unions for the deputations today, and both IJB members and parties. So I'd like to thank the unions for the deputation and for the time that they've spent with me over the last few months discussing the future care, and they have many ideas and a great deal of knowledge and experience to bring to the table. So it's very disappointing to hear that they do not feel they're being heard as they should be. Just to put things into context, crisis and cuts, these are two words that are constantly associated with our care services. And that's quite right. We've heard this morning from the deputations about funding crisis. We have recruitment crisis. We've got delayed discharge from hospital crisis. And all of that's happening and is very real for us all and our residents right now. So it is hardly surprising that when news breaks that care homes might close, that the assumption is that it's a cut, and a cut in response to these funding crises. But I'd like to really emphasise that the bed-based review that's being developed is not an exercise to produce short-term list of cuts and closures. It's part of the bigger picture that we have to address, the big move to take health and care out of hospital and into our communities and help people to stay well at home in our resilient communities. And it really is, it's a review to be welcomed, because we have to look at the future of our care services. We have to plan them carefully, redesigning, reorganising, recommissioning them right across the city so that we can meet the needs of our growing frail population. And we have to provide the best we can in the right place and at the right time. And I think, having heard from everyone today, we have that aspiration that every change will improve the journey for inpatients and it will improve the outcomes for people. And our staff are absolutely key in this process. And I really would hope that all our staff working in care homes and elsewhere across the city, and our unions who have positive contributions to make to this process, are included as we go forward. We know from work that has been done that people's needs and change over time. And what they majorly want is they want choice. They want to be able to choose to stay at home. They want to be able to choose to go to a care home when they need. They want to be able to move house and perhaps live in a communal, sociable, more friendly way. And we have to address all of these things going forward. The IJB has not made a decision to close care homes. There will be consultation in communities with staff and service users, and alongside that, population and public health data and everything that is being worked through. I am confident that the IJB will make an evidence-based decision when the time comes, as we have asked to do, and that information will be provided for us. And remember, the IJB board members include users, carers, and union representatives. But I'd like to touch on the hugely important issue, and in response to some of the comments from Councillor White about the public-private sectors, you know, about 70% of our care is delivered in Edinburgh, and it's in the hands of private companies. That's far higher than elsewhere in the country. And private companies, as we all too well know, can walk away when things go wrong, or if there's no profit to be made, or if the Care Commission has to step in. Now, there are some private companies that run a fantastic service, and there are those that do not. And we've heard from the deputations that staff on piecemeal contracts per visit do not have the terms and conditions that are suitable and are realistic. And that's simply not an acceptable use of council funds. Right now, our care homes do not have nurses as part of their team. So if you've got dementia and you need nursing care, the council has to go private. As mentioned by Des, the intermediate care is not available within the council. So the council care home provision needs to expand to be comprehensive, to be able to offer the choice that residents need. We have to be able to provide a reliable access to the right care for those who need it, close to their communities and in a safe place when they need it. I'm very happy to support the motion and to move the Green Amendment. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Main. And to second the Green Amendment, Councillor Corbett.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Provost. There isn't a great deal to say, so I'll do so formally.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corbett. And to move the Liberal Democrat Amendment, Councillor Aldridge.
Yes, thanks very much, Lord Provost. And I'd just like to echo a number of the words that have been said already. We are very close to consensus as a council on this, just as the council members on the EIJB have been united on our approach to this. And I'm grateful to the deputations this morning who have brought to our attention a number of things which I'm sure we'll all take up in the various fora. Lord Provost, our amendment is quite short and brief. We are very much in favour of a comprehensive consultation on the bed-based review. We are very much in favour of the consultation not being restricted to something as small, if you like, as the number of buildings and the number of beds. It has to be about the quality of care, the choice of care, the quality of the standards that staff have, the diversity of provision which needs to be available in the city, rather than being reduced to simply, are we keeping one particular building or three or four or five buildings open and run in a certain way? It's a much bigger review into a much bigger issue about the shape of how we provide care in the medium and long term. And the key to that is getting the care right for the individuals who need it. We all know that the care system is not right at the moment. We know it will not work in the future unless there is change, as a number of colleagues have already said. So our view is that we need to wait for the outcome of the consultation before we make any decision about whether we need an increase in the number of actual buildings that are publicly owned, or just what that shape is going to be, because we all know that more and more people want to be at home for longer. That doesn't require council-owned buildings. That requires the kind of care and support which is offered to them. But we also know that there are more people who require nursing-based care, and that's not available in some of our council run facilities. So we need to just listen to what all of the stakeholders say before we come to a conclusion about what the outcome is. And I'm quite disappointed in Councillor Day's intervention on this, which seemed to be prejudging the outcome of the consultation. And I don't think we should be doing that. We need to listen first and then act. The only difference we have is that we know that the EIJB is keen and there is a need for hospital-based complex care, and that Drumbray is an ideal place for that. And what our amendment seeks to make clear is that the Drumbray position is not about closure of a care home, it is about re-provisioning of a care home, and that the sooner we can get that done well, and to get that part of the jigsaw put in place, the sooner we can get to a point where there is better care and a better choice of care for the residents that we're here to serve. Thanks very much, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Aldridge. And to second the Liberal Democrat amendment, Councillor Neil Ross.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I welcome this opportunity to have an open and transparent debate on the subject of the care of our elderly and disabled residents. The problem I have with this motion is the desire to preempt and therefore devalue the outcome of the public consultation on the future of care homes before it takes place. Our principal concern should be to see that the choice is available of good quality care that is appropriate for residents that need it, however and wherever that is provided. And we want to see fair employment terms and conditions for all staff working in the care sector. Whatever the consultation shows, the IJB needs the flexibility to objectively respond to the demands and needs of recipients and not have its hands tied by an ideological commitment to increased publicly owned care home provision. Let's listen to the outcome of the consultation and then act accordingly. I second the Lib Dem amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ross. And in terms of contributions now, Councillor Arthur.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I can't resist commenting on the Lib Dem amendment to start with. I mean, they say they don't want to prejudge the consultation, but they want to go ahead with the closure of Drumbray, but they don't want to call it a closure, they want to call it a reprovisioning. Goodness me, fence sitting comes to mind, I guess. We have to go back to the trade union deputation. Really, that has set the context. Really, this is about funding, and the decision made some time ago by the Scottish Government to believe that the underfunded social care in councils, combine that with underfunded social care in health boards, merging them together would solve the underfunding problem, and it hasn't. So we know, if we read the newspapers, that the NHS is currently in a state of crisis in Scotland. Some of the reasons for that predate the pandemic, but the pandemic is playing a big part in that. Doctors yesterday said that the NHS needs to get some of the 1,000 beds that were cut. Some of them need to be returned to the NHS if it's to deal with some of the issues it's facing. The Scottish Government says that part of the delayed discharge issue is due to the lack of availability of beds in care homes. We have private care homes in Edinburgh announcing in recent weeks that they're going to invest millions of pounds in improving their care homes. And I know of one care home which very much has a hire and fire culture, I'm afraid to report, but has 25 NHS patients in it just now. So into this debate about the demand for care homes in Edinburgh, private companies investing, etc., the EIGB comes along with a proposal to close care homes, which seems to be going against the flow of everything that's happening both locally and nationally in terms of the long-term pressures on the NHS. So I really do welcome the consultation, but I hope the EIGB will use it as an opportunity to perhaps listen to consultants a little bit less and work with trade unions, care home residents, families and employees in these care homes a bit more to help come to the right decision. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Arthur, and setting an exceptionally good example of how to keep to time. Thank you. Hope others follow your suit. Councillor Cameron.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I shall do my very best. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that the EIGB, was established and has services delegated to it under the integration scheme by the Council and NHS Lothian. And therefore, whilst Councillors McVeigh and Day have said it's a decision for the EIGB, we are a key partner in funding it, and it is absolutely right and proper that we express a view on how things progress. The other thing worth reminding, I believe, is that the EIGB has said that it intends to publish its next strategic plan covering the years 2022 to 2025 next March, and that this strategic plan will be cognizant of the City of Edinburgh Council's Business Plan 2030 and the emerging NHS Lothian strategic framework. So we are inextricably linked, and we do have a responsibility, I believe, to make a view. In terms of what Conservative councillor colleagues have said around criticising Councillor Day for claiming to be open-minded and then not, well, I'm sorry, it's absolutely right that Councillor Day, and indeed all Labour councillors and councillors who believe in choice, but particularly in the public sector. Councillor Aldridge talked about, I think it was Councillor Aldridge talked about private, maybe it's Councillor White, private, public, and the role of the voluntary sector. We as a council and as a provider, key funder of the EIGB, have a massive role in this. And let's not forget, in this city, the pressures, not just on health and social care, but the pressures that we are under in terms of housing provision. There's a huge housing and homelessness crisis in this city that we are doing our utmost to address and meet. And the people who are seeking housing and who are without a home now are going to be, moving along the demographics to pressures on our care home provision. So I think it's right and appropriate for us to take a robust view on this. What I've said in other places is that I believe we should not only expand, and it's evident from my question, the deputation, we should be looking to expand our care home provision as a council, because not everyone will be able to avail themselves of what private opportunities there are for care. And let's not forget the amount of people in this city who are working in the care sector, who, as others have said, are not working under the best possible employment terms and conditions. We have opportunities with the land that we own, with the sites that we own, with the current sites that we own, and with sites coming on stream, to really make a difference, make an innovative difference on how we provide care home provision along all the spectrum of the types of care that others have mentioned earlier in this debate. And it's incumbent upon us to do that. And yes, people do want to be looked after at home. Not everyone is able to have that. Yes, certainly, Lord Provost. And let's not forget that care homes, whether they be private or public, are part of the community as well. And I want to see our provision as a council to be expanded, to be funded, and for the Scottish Government to give us far more money to enable us to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Munro.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and fellow councillors and anybody else that's watching. I think start off by thanking the trade unions to the insight they gave us into the way that the EIGB works. Greg Kelby's point about the box ticking exercise is one that all elected members should bear in mind. I would like to actually go into the report itself, though, that it was actually considered by them. And the report is actually based on the accommodation strategy of 2008, and a report that was actually made to the board in August 2019. Let's have a look at the 4 care homes that are there at this moment in time. Each of them could have their life extended by a further 5 years by investment. Clovenstone was rated Grade B, needs 182,000. Ferry Lee, graded B, needs 408,000. Forge Road, Grade A, 83,000. And Jewel House, Grade A, 249,000. A total of £923,119 to extend the life of all of these care homes for the next 5 years. Compare that to where it says in the report that what it will do is save 1.46 million. But the increased cost of care at home is 3.79 million. Increased cost of care at home, 3.79 million. From a budget that is actually one that is difficult for us to control, and this council has had to throw money at every year since the inception of the AIGB because it is underfunded. Let's have a look at the vacancies as well. There's 108 of them over the care homes. A whopping 47 out of the 60 places that are available at Drumbray. There's only 13 residents in Drumbray. It can actually take 60 people. Then let's have a look at Drumbray itself and see what the example is it provides us there. Drumbray replaced my primary school in a decision taken by a previous council. Now, it was supposedly to save money and was part of a closure programme that happened throughout the city. But the increased cost to children and families was an expansion at Foxcover, Clermiston, East Craigs, Gailmuir, Carstorphine. None of that was contained within any of the reports that said close Drumbray. It wasn't contained within it. And those extra costs are being borne now. So have a look at the report and see what it's saying. There's nothing it says about a care pathway. There's no care pathway delineated or long-term strategy. I'm not comfortable with any of this at all because I think that we've not had the information that we need to make decisions here. And that is made quite clear by the trade unions as well. They've not been consulted with properly. What we've got, and I've got real difficulty even just with the administration coalition motion today and the acceptance of some of the other parts. We've got a test here of faith by this organisation, the City of Edinburgh Council, and the Edinburgh Integrated Joint Board here to do the right thing here. Whether they take that test of faith and actually restore it for some of us here next Tuesday is up to them. But I hope they do, because the report and the information that we have with us to date does not make financial sense, does not stack up, does not address any of the waiting list issues that we have. And therefore, I will have real difficulty in supporting the administration motion today, never mind anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Munro. Councillor Watt.
Thank you, Lord Provost. This has been very interesting. We've heard a lot about choice. Do people go into care homes by choice? I think that they go into care homes because of need. And what we are not hearing is how that need across the board is going to be addressed. This proposal for the came to councillors like a bolt out of the blue. And of course, people would like to stay in their own homes. But what if their own home isn't suitable? I know several cases where people have had to move into hospital because their own is not suitable, and we do not have individual suitable housing to move them to. So this isn't about giving people choice and widening everything out. This is maintaining a basic service that people need. They need it right now. There's a queue, we've got empty places, and we've got a waiting list. And that is a real waste, a waste of resources that could be being used to alleviate difficulties that people and their families are facing right now. And so that's why, as a group, we're rejecting this. We're rejecting this now ahead of the consultation in the hope that we will start admitting people in need into care homes that are currently sitting half empty. I've got friends that are paying £2,000 a week for a place in a private care home where the standards are not what they would hope. Now, you know, that's not a criticism right across the board. That's not from an ideological position, and anecdotes are not evidence, but that's what I've been told. And they have them £2,000 a week for care that is not appropriate. Would they have liked to have chosen for their relative to stay in their own home? Yes, they would have. But the need was there for him to go into a home. And so can we please keep our eye on the ball, that while we're waiting and waiting and waiting for information that never seems to come, never seems to actually come, no straight answers to the questions that we ask, people in need are waiting, sitting on a waiting list. And that is why we reject closure, and please can we just get on with providing the care that we can provide. I'll be supporting the coalition motion and strongly ask the EIJB to start admitting people in need into care homes and letting staff do their job of taking care of these people. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Watt. Councillor Gordon.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I'll choose my words carefully. We've heard a lot today from colleagues that I share a common gain with sitting on the EIJB Bar 1, which is very notable as he chairs the EIJB. A lot of the statements that have been made should have been addressed within the confines of their own political organisations, because some of them are way off the beam. In general, there's been really good cross-party working with this, with the EIJB, from all my colleagues. We have a very close understanding of what we really need to be put in place. And there's been a phrase that's been used constantly within EIJB, which is the right treatment, the right place at the right time. And that's what we're trying to strive for. It's a whole system approach that has to be looked at, not bricks and mortars. We want to give our citizens the gold standard of care, and we cannot do that with facilities that don't meet the proposals. We can build 100 care homes. We have to staff them, provide care provision within them, and fund them. So it's not just a matter of that, it's a matter of getting the actual right services in place. I'm very disappointed that this has not been understood, and we're now getting to a situation where it's been politicised rather than working on a collegiate, sensible approach moving forward. I would also like to draw the attention to all members of the council. The papers for the EIJB meeting are live. I don't agree with all that's put into it, and there will be questions and debate on the 28th, but it does give a lot of the answers that have been raised today and the level of engagement that's taken place so far. And all of the EIJB members are keen to make sure that there's a widest possible representation taken over the future care provision within Edinburgh, so it will be as comprehensive as physically possible. Thank you.
Councillor Gordon. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you, Lord Provost, and I think Councillor Gordon's contribution was extremely timely, and I think that the whole system approach that's been advocated for healthcare by a number of councillors is the right way to go. That will involve difficult choices, and it's right there's a broad consultation in that process, but the health service and the care service is not there to keep buildings open. It's there to provide health care to people in Edinburgh. That's its sole purpose. And so if we have to make difficult choices after a robust and clear consultation, then that will have to be dealt with. I'm surprised by some of our coalition colleagues politicising this difficult choice. I do recognise the excellent job that unions do in protecting their workforces and ensuring they get paid proper terms and conditions and pensions. And I hope that the consultation can really work with the union labour force, who do an excellent job. But they shouldn't either be wedded to particular facilities. They should be wedded, as I'm sure they are, to providing excellent care, and for that to continue in our city. So I think it's right and appropriate that there is a whole-scale review of the system to make sure it does the best it can with the resources it has. And if more resources can be put in, so much the better. One of my coalition colleagues talked about conflated closures of schools in a time where the roles are falling to extensions to schools later and so on. It's not really related to this care home issue, I don't consider personally. So I think we need to give the people involved in the process, including the unions, the right to get on with it, consult the patients, the unions, and the clinical directors. We shouldn't be suggesting that I would suggest it's a clinical decision whether people are put into care homes such as Drumbray. It's not for fellow councillors to make that decision. But it may be rhetoric might be great, but at the end of the day, it's the clinicians that should be making these calls. Thank you, Lord Provost, for the opportunity to speak. And it's a difficult subject, and I think we all need to rally around this, protect the jobs, protect the conditions. And the problem with recruitment in the care industry is probably private care homes, not universally, but some of them are not paying the right terms and conditions. And if they improve those, the recruitment crisis might be addressed that way. So I'll end my contribution there. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Councillor Gardner. Councillor Jim Campbell.
Thank you, Lord Provost. I've been listening carefully to what the members of the EIJB have said to us this morning, and I thank them for their contribution. And I agree that it is a difficult issue. I want to speak specifically, though, in favour of the Conservative Group amendment and point 5 in that, because I think as a council, what I'm interested in understanding is the impact of any proposal from the EIJB on council policy, which is clearly the area council has primary responsibility for. So I do hope that members of the EIJB and indeed all councillors and specifically the administration would take that point on board, because I think it would be very useful if we knew specifically what the implications were for council policy with any proposal that comes forward, and not least the budget pressures that it might bring to council, which members will know I've spoken about previously, and the risks inherent with the EIJB decision making on the council budget, something that we do not control directly as councillors. Thank you, Lord Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Campbell. I have no other members indicating that they wish to contribute, so right of reply, Councillor McVeigh.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost. I will parrot, we have heard from 4 out of our 5, I think, members of the EIJB, and it is, I'm not going to cast aspersions, I know the convener of the EIJB has someone that needs to be in, and I absolutely respect that, but it's a shame for the debate that position is not being set out very clearly from the convener. I would say I met the chair along with Councillor Gordon earlier in the week, and obviously Councillor Gordon's meeting him on a fairly regular basis on these matters. We've heard a number of very definitive statements in this debate, and I'm not sure they have been hugely helpful in trying to get us to where we all need to be. I started off this debate by talking about one of the things that we absolutely need in this is to put the standard and quality of care as one of the forefront aspects that we're talking about, and look at the long-term trajectory of what we hope a new national care service will look like, and try and swim with the tide on that. Now that's, we all know, Lord Provost, it will take a while for Feely to be implemented. As I think Councillor Doggett said earlier in the debate, the exact shape of that post the parliamentary process is yet to take shape. The consultation is out now. There are a number of factors that need to be thrashed out, but we do know some of the thrust of where we're trying to get to, and where there's a very clear sense of that. And I think that's what our motion is trying to get to. I would pick up on a point that Councillor Gardner made as well around staffing, and it is one of the major things that the industry, and I mean the sector as an absolute whole, whether it's public or private, regardless of who's delivering it, is really struggling with. We'll have a report to the next Policy and Sustainability Committee for Council's information on some of those pressures that are being faced, and it is important that the IGB has the ability to try and maximise the amount of care being delivered to that highest possible standard. I am quite keen that we do progress as consensually as possible, and I hope when I set out earlier the debate, and I've listened to my Conservative colleagues and Liberal Democrat colleagues very carefully, but I think I'm still in the position of only being able to accept points 1, 2 and 4 of the Conservatives and the Green amendment, and unfortunately still been unable to accept the Liberal Democrat amendment. But if I can say so, Lord Provost, I think we are far closer to unanimity on this than perhaps some of the debate has articulated. And I think the conclusions and outcomes, certainly in terms of service provision for our citizens, there's certainly not a cigarette paper between any of us as 63 councillors in trying to progress that. So with that, I'm more than happy to move the motion with those changes and amendments, and very much hope Council supports that.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. Gavin, to the vote.
Thank you, Lord Provost. Could I just check whether the Conservatives are wishing to still pursue the amendment, given that there's 1, 2 and 4 paragraphs to accepted?
Councillor Duggar?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Provost. I think paragraph 5 is particularly important, and it's our responsibility as councillors to ensure that we can oversee the things that we do have responsibility for, rather than IJB matters. So as a result of that, I would still wish to retain paragraph 5. I have been corresponding with the council leader, but he has indicated in his summing up that he's unable to accept that, unfortunately. And there would have been an alternative compromise as well on my paragraph 3. But if that's the case, then the amendment will stand.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Councillor McVeigh. We're at item 8.1, seconded by Councillor Day, which accepts paragraphs 1, 2 and 4 of the Conservative amendment and the Green amendment in full. Opposing that, we have a Conservative amendment as circulated, moved by Councillor Doggett, seconded by Councillor White, and a Liberal Democrat amendment moved by Councillor Aldred, seconded by Councillor Neil Ross. As before, we will go to an electronic vote. I will launch this and give everyone 1 minute to vote.
Lord Provost, can I just say that I didn't actually withdraw the Green amendment, but as Gavin has outlined, it's not on that I will do so.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Okay, I will now launch the vote. Lord Provost, I've closed the vote. I just want to check whether there's any elected members who have been unable to cast their vote electronically.
Yeah, I haven't been able to, Lord Provost. It's Councillor Booth here. I'm voting for the motion with the Green amendment, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Then that means we have 34 votes for the motion, 16 votes for the Conservative amendment, and 5 votes for the Liberal Democrat amendment. The motion is passed.